Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the whole concept of recomposition, which is a very controversial topic depending on which expert you ask, as to how easy it is to do or how impossible it could be to do for certain individuals. And I kind of take a middle ground on that. So let me put on my +5 cap of weaponsmithing, see if I can skill up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this for a few minutes. All right, cliff notes. Recomposition is easy for people in certain situations. They're pretty easy for anyone who's been lifting a little while to know what they are. For other people, they're more difficult, and the further you get away from those ideal situations, the slower and more difficult recomposition becomes. And I would say that there is a certain threshold that a person can reach as an advanced drug-free lifter to where body recomposition is nearly impossible from a practical perspective. Theoretically possible, but practically probably impossible for them at a certain threshold. So let's go into a little more detail on it. And I thought of this because I saw Dr. Mike Israetel, who I happen to like his work. I reviewed his Renaissance Periodization Diet book a while back. And I happen to like his work. I don't always agree with him, but he's definitely a top expert in the field of gaining muscle, performance, even body recomposition. But he linked a slide on it discussing some of that. And basically the highlights of that slide were that body recomposition, and again, for those who don't understand that, that means losing fat while gaining muscle concurrently at the same time. That for novice lifters, people who just started training, it's actually pretty easy. In fact, it's almost invariable that if you put any novice lifter on a decent program, it doesn't have to be a great program. It just has to be decent. Like in the top 50% of programs, like you take 100 programs randomly, the top 50 of them. So it doesn't have to be that great. As long as it's got some progressive overload in there and some decent resistance for most of the muscles in their body, that program is capable of recompositioning them if, here's the caveat, they get sufficient protein, which is actually easier to do than most people think. Most people don't realize the only people who might struggle to get enough protein for gains in are usually going to be maybe vegans, or particularly raw vegans. Most people getting enough protein in to gain muscle or lose fat is probably not an issue, and if you're really worried about it, just count it. I have whole other videos on that, but if they're getting sufficient protein and they're close to calorie maintenance, if they're close to calorie maintenance, most people are going to recomposition on any decent program as a noob. And what do I mean by close to? Meaning they're not gaining or losing more than about a half a pound a week. As long as the scale's not moving much more than that, they're probably going to lose some fat while gaining muscle. Meaning if they're slow cutting, they're slowly losing weight, they're probably going to gain muscle. If they are very, very slowly gaining weight, very slowly, again, no more than maybe half a pound a week at the most, maybe less, they're going to lose some fat. That invariably happens for novice lifters. It's just the way it works. It's because they have a total shift in nutrient partitioning, and because novice lifters gain muscle so rapidly and so easily, they don't have to eat many calories, much of a calorie surplus to do it. In fact, since they have a shift in nutrient partitioning, they will tend to just repartition more of the food they eat towards their muscles at first due to this shock to the body, this whole idea of lifting weights all of a sudden for a few months. Their body's not ready to cope with that, and it will tend to respond with pretty rapid muscle growth. And remember, guys, your first year of lifting will probably be 2/3 of the muscle you will gain without drugs for the rest of your life. You're going to make the majority of your gains then, and accordingly, it's just really easy to do. Your body just responds amazingly. And so they tend to gain muscle and lose a little bit of fat as long as they don't eat too much. And again, conversely, because it's so easy for them to gain muscle, if they're getting enough protein, they can actually undereat a little bit, gain muscle. Well, even gaining that muscle uses up calories. All that energy has to come from somewhere. It comes from their body fat. So those people actually lose fat even faster than people who don't lift weights, who are losing the same amount of weight usually. Because again, they're having to build muscle with some of their calories, which puts them into a deeper deficit. So they end up losing body fat even more quickly. So noobs recomposition is easy. It is so easy. People who are obese, people who have a large amount of extra body fat. And I'm talking clinical obesity. I'm talking, again, men who are over probably 30% body fat, women who are over about 35% body fat, can absolutely gain muscle mass while in a calorie deficit. In fact, even if they're somewhat advanced lifters, they might actually gain. They're going to find that at least they keep all of their muscle while losing fat slowly, as long as they don't do it for too long. But it's just a lot easier for obese people to gain muscle without overeating at all. And if they're not having to overeat, they're going to lose body fat if they're losing muscle. And it's because they already are overeating. And people will say, well, what do you mean? That doesn't make any sense. All right. Overeating is the act of putting more fuel in a tank, storing fuel away for energy, right? If you've overeaten for the past 10 years and you've put on 100 pounds of lard onto your body, you have 10 years of overeating already saved up. Think about it that way. These people can go down to maintenance calories or slightly below maintenance calories, and their body can pull from that store of body fat they already have to do at least low intensity training. So most of their daily activities that they're doing, really the only glucose and stuff they're really going to need is for their brain. It's going to be for their weightlifting and things, and pretty much everything else out of that, their body, as long as they're in a small calorie deficit, anyone who's obese like that, they can draw all the extra energy that they need from their body fat. So they're not having to expend calories they're consuming to build new muscle. If it's being stimulated, they have such a massive reserve that their body can readily give up, that they can tap right into their fat stores. Their fat stores become their extra recovery calories when you're really obese, because your body can easily tap into those because there's such a massive amount there. So these people can undereat a little bit. Again, you're talking, over 30% body fat in men, over 35% in women. They can cut their calories back and start losing weight and still gain muscle just as quickly sometimes as someone who's actually overeating. A skinnier guy, they might actually be able to gain muscle at the same rate he does when he's actually doing a slow bulk. And it's because they already have bulk. They already have all the energy stored away, the surplus energy they need to function and to train and to recover. It's all there already. They can tap right into it. So they can actually make really, really good gains. They can make their normal noob gains for at least a little while, unless they've been dieting more than a few months. And there's other studies on that. That's a whole other topic also, is that invariably if you cut for too long, your body will have a tendency to cut into muscle tissue no matter what. But that's another topic. The other people who readily recomposition, going to be people who use anabolic drugs. Anabolic drugs shift nutrient partitioning. Most anabolic steroids, even though they're primarily anabolic in that they put muscle on you, most of them have at least a very, very mild fat burning component. And it's not going to be dramatic, but it's mild. But you guys get the idea. Well, you take someone who doesn't really eat a huge amount of food, they struggle to bulk a little bit. When they go on some of these nutrient partitioning drugs, what happens? Most of them recomposition. Most of these guys, again, as long as they don't eat too much, a lot of times, unless people are on very, very, very high doses, they can gain body fat. But they're going to gain body fat slower than if they weren't on the drugs. All right, the drugs slow down fat gain. Now, they might bloat and look fat from water gain from overeating, but it may not be much fat that they're gaining. But they can gain fat, but it's going to be slower. And conversely, if they're not eating enough calories to really gain weight rapidly from a lot of the drugs, drug users, people using anabolics, will tend to tap into their body fat a little bit and start leaning out. Particularly early on when they first start, or if they're using a fairly aggressive dose for wherever they're at. Like the studies that we've seen on guys, we took guys, and I've linked this study quite a few times in quite a few videos. We have multiple studies that show that when healthy young men were given 600 milligrams of testosterone a week and they were told to stop lifting weights and sit on the couch, they gained an average of 18 pounds of muscle in 20 weeks. But they all also lost a couple of pounds of body fat, confirmed by DEXA scans. So these guys, their scale weight went up over 15 pounds. And they lost fat. Not huge amounts, but it was a little bit. And by that same token, when you see certain substances like Trim used by the hard gainer, those guys can literally eat anything they want, and they tend to lose fat and gain muscle. Mainly because they don't have a massive appetite. And you combine that with the nutrient partitioning ability of that drug, those guys they rip up and get bigger at the same time. The nature of the substance for someone who's not an aggressive overeater. But invariably, you know what happens? When guys reach a certain size, they struggle to gain more muscle even on a given amount of drugs. So obviously at a certain point, the recomposition effect slows down and might even stop, again, depending on how big they are versus what they're actually using. So there's still a point of diminished returns. So what about everyone else? Does that mean that recomposition is stupid for everyone else? And I'm going to say no. Even though all of the data shows that recomposition for people who are past the novice phase, who are drug-free, everything else, it is a very, very slow process. But depending upon the person, gaining body fat might not be in your goals. A lot of people don't want to gain fat. And I would tell you that you do need to gain a little fat to bulk up. Ideally, to gain as much muscle as possible, you're probably going to have to gain fat and muscle at a 1-to-1 ratio once you're past the novice phase. But if a person is willing to accept dramatically slower gains, they can stay lean. Again, lean being a relative term, of course. Meaning, are we talking 8% body fat? No. If you're 8% body fat, you're going to struggle to keep the muscle that you even have without using drugs. That's reality. You're not going to just start packing muscle on. That's a bit of a myth that you're going to be able to stay that lean and gain muscle. No, you're going to go catabolic. You're going to start losing muscle eventually, trying to maintain that leanness. But say someone who is a healthy level of body fat, 11, 12, 13%, 15%, especially something in the 15% range. Someone is 15 to 20% body fat. I would say that there still is reasonable for them to recomposition. If their goal is to say, I don't want to gain any body fat when I bulk, and I don't care if that means I only gain 1 or 2 pounds of muscle per year. If they can live with that, someone who's already made their new gains, who says, I don't care if I only gain a pound of muscle per year as long as I don't gain any fat. And I don't care if I do this for the next 5 or 6 years. I just want to keep at a healthy body fat. I don't want to gain any fat, and I'd like to recomposition a little bit. Well, if that's what a person's goal is, then that's perfectly reasonable, because what people need to remember is that not everyone is trying to gain maximal muscle. Not everyone is trying to compete in something to where they need to be as big as possible, as quickly as possible. And if that's the case and a person's doing it for mainly cosmetic or health reasons, for the long term, I don't think it's unreasonable for an intermediate or advanced lifter to say, okay, I want to do a slow recomposition for the next 5 years. And so what? If I only gain a few pounds of muscle, I'll lose a few pounds of fat, and my body percentage will go down 2% without anyone ever seeing me bulk. Well, if that's what a person's goal is, I'd say a recomposition still makes sense for them. It's entirely based upon your goals and what you want out of your training. And that's the best way to look at it. Now, we would always say that for someone who's a weight class athlete who needs to get tremendously better year to year, they're probably going to need to bulk and cut, or they're going to need drugs. That's the simple reality. No way around that. But that's not everybody. That's not even close to everybody. There's a lot of people who aren't competing as weight class athletes where they need to make a weight class and need to see noticeable recomposition year to year. In which case, those people, again, need to do it in steps. They need to do it in phases. They don't want to do the slow route because they only have so many years of their competitive life that they're willing to invest in there. And they can't wait 10 years to make dramatic changes, or 5 years or whatever. They've got to bulk and cut and still end up looking like they recomped at the end. But everyone else who's just like, I don't care if I slowly gain muscle as long as I get a little leaner. A lot of just average fitness-oriented people, it's probably reasonable to just recomp then. In fact, a lot of those people might not even need to really count calories. They could just eat their normal meals and roughly what they do, and once they find a balance in their life, they'll stay roughly at the same body weight, only fluctuate a few pounds. Plenty of people do it all the time. And just slowly recomposition over the years. And for a lot of people who aren't hardcore, they're not seeking to be competitive in something, not an unreasonable way to do things, but they do need to understand they are going to gain muscle a lot slower that way. And a lot of people are willing to accept that trade-off. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.